If you go out and you buy a brand new Mercedes or a brand new BMW, that's in the luxury car sector. Those cars will depreciate down to zero. That's just how they are. Over like I don't know why specifically those cars, but you could buy a $150,000 BMW and it'll go down to almost zero. Now, if you go just above that level and you go into the exotic car space, those cars, they don't go down to zero. It's very interesting if you look at the depreciation curve on these cars. For example, if you buy a Lamborghini Huracan,
Hmm.
for example, I bought mine probably about 3 years ago now. Um, it was worth like 280,000 back then. It's still worth 280,000. Like it hasn't depreciated at all.
Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Mettle. I'm here today with Austin Zelan, founder of Zelan Enterprises, private jet investor, AI and blockchain enthusiast, and passive income coach with a mission to create 100 millionaires through his unique investment and income strategies. I love that goal, bro. Congratulations on wanting to make such a massive impact for so many people. And it's super exciting for me to have you here today. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So your background is really interesting. It's fascinating to me. Tell us a little bit about your journey from MBA at Northwestern University to founding Zelan and Consulting, and where what I'm really curious about is where did your desire to create? By the way, did I get it right? Is it 100 or 1,000 millionaires?
Well, the old goal was 100, so you might see that number floating around the internet somewhere, but the new one is 1,000.
I like it. I like it. All right. So
Yeah.
walk us through a little bit of your background, and I'm curious where that desire came from.
Yeah, definitely. So, I've always been like pretty entrepreneurial in general, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So even when I was still in college, I was already working, and I did network marketing for a while, used that marketing experience to get me a marketing job. Then I went to Microsoft, and so kind of like took all the stepping stones to this job that I thought was my dream job. I thought consulting was going to be like the thing for me. And it was great. Like at first, I was super happy. I learned a ton there. I got to work with some very, very smart people. That was like my favorite part because everybody around me was like a genius. And I was like fascinated to just learn from these people. And it was a really cool experience, got great benefits, all that stuff, nice office. But at the end of the day, like after about maybe a year, I was starting to get a little bit bored. And
Hmm.
I realized that I had all these things that I thought I wanted, but maybe that wasn't what I wanted after all. And I noticed that I was doing all this work, but it wasn't really having an impact on anybody's life. It wasn't really changing anything. Like I could just disappear and Microsoft would still be around. Like nothing would
Hmm.
happen to them. They wouldn't even notice. So I wasn't really impacting anybody's life, maybe like my immediate team in some capacity, but that's about it. And so I had this hunger to have more impact with my life. How can I help somebody be better? How can I help somebody improve or make more money or be more successful or happier or whatever it is? And I started like, and during that time, by the way, I always had one of my values is to make more money so that I can have a better life and like travel and stuff like that. I really love traveling. So I was always looking for ways to make money outside my job so I could travel. And so I started investing into different things. And at first it was just day trading. I was trading on the foreign exchange market. So trading Forex. And I basically just lost money for my first year, I'd say. Horrible, horrible experience. About a little over a year, actually. I was just losing money left and right. And so after that, I had seen some people be profitable with it though. So I decided to stick with it. And so while I was at Microsoft, that's kind of when I became profitable at that. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I could potentially create something outside of this corporate job. So that gave me like a glimmer of hope. And so I started putting my money into the foreign exchange market, trading more of it. And eventually I found a strategy that worked very consistently. And so I found a team of developers, like software engineers, who could take my strategy and put it into code. So that way, this like robot that we would create could trade for me 24 hours a day instead of me having to sit there. Unfortunately, when you're trading Forex, you have to trade at night, Pacific time. So the trading day starts around 11 p.m. So I'd be trading
Hmm.
most of the night, like barely sleeping, then going to my meetings. Like I was just exhausted. So I was so thankful for the software. But when we created it, we did all the testing, like everything should have worked correctly. I was still terrified to put my money into it. So I decided to go to the bank and get a bunch of credit cards. So I got as many credit cards as I possibly could, and I got about probably $45,000 worth, 47, something like that. And I took all the money off the credit cards and I put it into the software, and I'm like, hey,
Wow.
there's two outcomes here. Either I go into debt and I file for bankruptcy, or maybe I could make a bunch of money. So we'll see what happens. So, anyways, long story short, like a year later, my account had grown very, very significantly, over 200,000 in that account. And I'm like, okay, like this is legitimate. This is real. This could really work. This might be my ticket out of here. And so I started licensing that software out. And that was really my first real business where I was licensing the software to other people. And my colleagues at Microsoft and all these people began to use the software on their own money. And so it was trading for them. They were making money and all that good stuff. And from there, I, obviously left Microsoft and lifestyle changed significantly. And I realized at a certain point that, okay, I probably should start diversifying because if I'm all in on this one thing, let's say regulations change, let's say my software just breaks one day, like what am I going to do? I
Yep.
don't want to go back to Microsoft. So I started diversifying into anything I could possibly find outside of Forex. So that was initially one of some of my first investments were like crypto mining. I was buying like actual miners and mining crypto. I was buying fractions of oil wells down in Texas and we were drilling for oil. We had online stores, Amazon, Shopify, Facebook Marketplace, all of them, Walmart. Tried all of them. We did, let's see, Airbnbs. We did some short-term rentals, long-term rentals, fix and flips. I went into exotic car rentals, private jet charters, all this stuff. So over time, I kind of built this portfolio of things that I had tried out. And I'd say probably only 60% of them actually worked out.
Sure.
Um, and so over time, I had figured out which ones were working and which ones were not working. And a lot of the people who were using my trading software, they started noticing on Instagram, hey, this guy's investing in oil wells. This guy's investing in that. This guy's investing in that. Can you teach me how to do that too? And so I figured, hey, I could, kind of just give you a brief overview and say good luck and go figure it out. Or maybe I could make a whole program out of it. That way, this person is invested. They're going to attend an actual educational series or seminar or whatever it would be, and they'd pay for it. So they'll pay attention and at least they have a better chance of succeeding. So I created a whole coaching program around it, started to take on one-on-one students for a while. Then my calendar filled up. Eventually, I started doing group coaching. And now we've like scaled up to the next level of that where we're not investing into like, let's say, miners individually, which are maybe, $5,000 each. We're investing into businesses. So that's when Zelan Consulting was born because I had invested into so many things. Now I was investing in businesses and helping them grow. And so that's done through my consulting company. But I'd say I've tried just about any passive income investment you could possibly find, including all sorts of real estate, everything from like super cheap houses in Pennsylvania for like $50,000 to like expensive houses down in Florida. Airbnb arbitrage, like literally anything you could think of, I've probably tried it.
Right on. Love that. What a great history. Thanks for the sharing that. And there's one thing I just want to highlight in there, and that is that, you alluded to the fact that a couple of characteristics that I see, Austin, in entrepreneurs, and that is they develop a skill set. They're highly specially skilled in something, right? Your Forex trading that you lost for a year eventually became good at it, created profits, and then created a software around it. But
Mhm.
the second component to that is you had an exceptionally high risk tolerance. And that's what a lot of people miss, is that you have to have both of those things in many instances. If you didn't come from money, then you have to create a skill and you have to be willing to take a risk. And that's really the formula that I see most self-made entrepreneurs have. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I'm kind of an all in kind of guy. So I figured, hey, if I lose everything, I lose everything. I just restart. But at least that way I have a chance to make it work.
Mm.
And that's benefited me a lot in life.
Yeah, love that. Great story. So I want to talk a little bit about, you have an interesting portfolio of passive investments. So you've been in the real estate game. You mentioned to me that you're interested in the or still invested heavily in the car high-end car rental business, and then also in investing in jets. Now, for me, I look at both of those as depreciating assets. And the question I have in my mind is, well, why would I want to invest in a depreciating asset for cash flow when I can invest in an appreciating asset for cash flow? And I'm just ignorant to the answer to that. So please enlighten me.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's a great question. And surface level, that's exactly what it looks like. That's exactly how it is. But if you have a strategy behind it, you can a lot of times avoid those things. So let me give you an example. If you go out and you buy a brand new Mercedes or a brand new BMW, that's in the luxury car sector. Those cars will depreciate down to zero. That's just how they are. Over like, I don't know why specifically those cars, but you could buy a $150,000 BMW and it'll go down to almost zero. Now, if you go just above that level and you go into the exotic car space, those cars, they don't go down to zero. It's very interesting if you look at the depreciation curve on these cars. For example, if you buy a Lamborghini Huracan,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I bought mine probably about 3 years ago now. Um, it was worth like 280,000 back then. It's still worth 280,000. Like it hasn't depreciated at all
Wow.
because I'm buying it at a place where it's already depreciated. Like brand new, that car could have been 350 or 320, but the point that I bought it at, it had already depreciated and the depreciation curve had flattened out. Now, that specific model it has the specs to carry that value. Not all of them are going to be like that. If you just bought like the crappiest base model Lamborghini you could find, and let's say I think the Huracans came out in like 2016 or 2015 or something. So from that year, if you look at it, brand new, they were also around that price. But when they depreciate, they go down to about 200,000. And we're talking about like in good condition. If you
Right.
have like 100,000 miles on it or it's like scratched up, it's going to be less. But a reasonable expectation is like 200,000 at the very, very minimum. It never really dips down below. And why does that happen? Well, let's say they made 1,000 of these cars. Let's say every year 50 of them get crashed. So the supply is shrinking by 50 every single year. So it's 950, then 900, then 850, then 800, and it just keeps going down and down and down. So you have some people are collectors, they'll never drive them. So maybe another 100, 200 are somewhere in museums. A few others are being rented out all the time, so they're really rough and abused. So you have less and less good quality cars left on the market. And so that really, really props up the value of these cars because at the end of the day, it's a very unique creation. Some people really, really love these cars and they will pay whatever price that is set for them as long as they can get their hands on one of these cars. So it really keeps the price propped up at a decent level. And quite honestly, if you were just to part out the car, you could probably part it out for like 200,000 anyways. Because like a front bumper is like 30,000, exhaust systems like another 30. So it's like it's an expensive car even just to part out by parts, but the demand is so high below that $200,000 level that as soon as any car goes below it, it immediately gets off the market. Somebody buys it. So it holds up price at about 200,000. Now, my point with the depreciating supply is that over time, this now becomes a collector's car. Like, oh wow, you have an original Lamborghini Huracan. That car isn't even in production anymore. Now we have whatever car. This car is going to start going up in value. So if you look at the older Lamborghinis, Ferraris, they're all going up in value. They're not going down. That doesn't happen with BMW, Mercedes, all those cars. So if you can find a car that's reached its like at least as close to that minimum value as far as depreciation goes, where the depreciation curve flattens out, if you buy it there, it's likely you're going to be able to sell the car for whatever you bought it for or really close to it at the minimum. So that's kind of how we hedge against depreciation in cars. The same thing for jets. If you go buy a brand new jet, you're going to pay $9-10 million for the same jet that I'm buying that's maybe 15 years old, but I'm buying it for 4 or 5 million,
Mm.
right? And it's not going to go down below that because they just don't sell for less than that. That's where the demand is. Demand is at that price. If anything goes below it, it immediately gets sold. So I look for unique situations like that when an asset like this has already depreciated to the point where it's not going to depreciate much more, if anything. And that protects me from losing money on that.
Love it. All right, that makes a tremendous amount of sense to me. So, talk to me about Well, first of all, how are you financing these cars and these jets at scale? What does that look like? And then I'd love to know of the capital that you have invested in each of those purchases, like what kind of rate of return are you getting? I'm assuming there's all kinds of repair and maintenance and captain expenses for jet charters. So walk us through like what does that look like from a return on investment standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. So as far as financing them goes, we've partnered with a lot of banks across the country that we can basically get anybody financed.
Hmm.
I have yet to find somebody who can't get financed. There's
Wow.
always some way to creatively finance them, whether we have to owner finance or whatever. But so far, everybody has gotten at least a couple options for financing. And so that's been really great. That was a strategic move for sure. Now, as far as like the expenses and all that stuff goes, and returns. When it comes to exotic cars, like here's a typical scenario. So, for example, I had a Rolls Royce here in Seattle. And keep in mind, this is not a good market for exotic cars. This is a very slow market. Nobody's out here like driving around on their Rolls Royce, but people still rented it out, right? So it was generating maybe about $10,000 a month in revenue. We were renting it out for I think about $1,000 a day. I don't even remember. It was about a year ago since I've had that car, but about $1,000 a day or so. We had some discounts sometimes, so it'd be a little bit less or a little bit more, maybe 1250, 800, whatever. But I think the average is about 1,000. So let's say 10,000 or 10 days a month, so about $10,000 a month. My monthly payment on the car was like $3,300 maybe, maybe another 200, 300 for insurance. So let's call it $3,500. I'm making $10,000 a month on the car though. And then there's a profit split that the lot gets paid for running the whole rental car operation. So stuff like that, it's like very straightforward. If you go somewhere like New York or Miami, you can a lot of times get 15, 20, 25 days a month in rentals. So
Hmm.
there's people I had a Lamborghini Urus in New York, which we were renting out for like 1,800 bucks a day. you know.
Wow.
And so if you do even 20 days with that, that's it's a lot of money. It's like 36,000 a month. But we weren't doing 20 days with the Urus. I'd say, 10 to 15 is more like it. But yeah, so stuff like that is good. You can make a lot of money doing that. And again, your payment is maybe $5,000 max a
Hmm.
month on it, and everything else is profit. So what I tell people is like, hey, even if you're not netting any money, you're at least paying down the car. And we're usually not buying it brand new. So again, if you buy a Lamborghini at $200,000 and it takes you 2 years to just pay the whole thing off, when you sell it, guess what you're going to get? A check for $200,000. So you are making that money. You might just not be getting it up front, but of course, we always try to net some profits on top of that as well. So that's how it works with exotic cars. As far as jets, so the typical model that we shoot for is anywhere between 15 and 40% a month in net profit, or sorry, not a month, a year. Uh,
Hmm.
Very big difference. 15 to 40% a year on the private jets. So we basically have a charter company that we work with, and this covers all expenses, including insurance and parking and pilots and pilot training and maintenance. And we even set aside every hour the plane flies, we set aside some money for it's called engine overhaul reserves. So
Hmm.
what that does is it allows you to repair the engines when they need to be overhauled. And approximately every 4,000 hours, you need to totally disassemble and like rebuild the engine.
Wow.
That's what's really important. But that can cost like $400,000 per engine. So
Wow.
instead of us coming to our investors and being like, hey guys, we need $800,000 for our two engines, we've already set aside for every hour that it's flown, we set aside, let's say, $2,000. So once we've flown 4,000 hours, we have $800,000 sitting in the bank. We take that money, overhaul the engines, we're good to go.
Very interesting. So as it relates to kind of like capital investment in those things, so let's take a high-end Lamborghini or a Rolls Royce. What percentage of down payment are most people putting on those cars?
It really depends. So like my last Lambo that I bought, I put 20K down. It was a Lamborghini Urus, about I think it was like 260,000 or 280, and I put 20K down. So that's how that one works. Now, some people, depending on their credit, will have to put more. I can't really give an accurate estimate because I've seen
Yeah.
people put up to maybe 30% down.
Hmm.
Um, for example, when I bought my first Lamborghini, it was that almost 300,000. I think it was like 280, 290, something like that with all the taxes and fees. And I had to put 100,000 down.
Mm.
But that was my first car I ever financed. I had never financed anything, not even like a Honda or a Toyota or anything. I had no history. So yeah, I had
Pretty
to.
cool first car.
Well, no, I had cars before that, but I was paying cash for them
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah.
And then I was like, hey, maybe I should finance because these cars are getting expensive. So I financed and I found out that you can't just go finance a Lambo. It was very hard. So they found me an option though that got approved and I had to put approximately 30% down. So I did, and it worked out. So that's probably the highest that I've seen. I don't think I've ever seen anybody put 30% though. That was just me.
It's really interesting. In real estate, it's really hard to create cash flow in these high cost of living areas like LA, San Francisco, Miami, New York. However, the converse is true, where those are probably the best areas, those high cost of living areas, to have a rental like a high end car that you're renting out. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting, and it seems like the cash flow would be significantly more if you're bringing in $10,000 a month, which I think was one of your examples. 3,000 a month for payment, then you've got $500 for insurance or whatever. So I mean that's $6,000 a month, $6,500 a month in cash flow. What are you splitting with the lot, and who does the bookings? Like, what does that look like in terms of the actual man or woman hours involved in that, and what do you split with that?
Yeah, so there's several different options. I've seen anything from 80/20, where the customer gets 80, the lot gets 20, or the car rental company gets 20, and I've seen all the way up to like 50/50. So it just really depends on who you're going with and how they're managing it for you. But typically the way that it works is that they handle everything. You literally do nothing. You just get a report at the end of the month and you get a wire transfer or a check, however you have it. So it's very simple. I mean, it's truly passive income because on their end, what they're doing is doing all the advertising. They have the website, they have the cleanup and all that stuff. They're washing your car, they're filling it up with gas, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And so at the end of the day, they are screening these clients. When a client comes in, they make sure that they have full coverage insurance, that it's been around for at least 90 days, that they have up to $300,000 in liability and like all that stuff, just to make sure that your asset is protected. And if the customer crashes it, that's fine. Insurance is going to get you a new car. So it's actually not that bad of an outcome because at the end of the day, you just get your money back, or more in some cases if the car grew up in value. So yeah, it's a very automated process, I would say. And you're not having to do much as the investor. The only thing that you do is you talk to them, see what cars they need, you buy the car, and then you give it to them to manage. It can be a little bit tricky in some markets, so you have to be very specific with the type of car that you're getting. But for the most part, it's a profitable model, and we've seen it work well.
All right, so let me just, I'm an ROI guy, right? With real estate investments, I don't care what the house looks like. Let me see the pro forma.
Yeah.
So let me just do some back of the napkin math here. You got 10,000 a month in income. You're going to split, let's just say 30% of that with the lot, just to use a round number. So they're going to take 3,000 of that. That leaves you 7,000. Am I close so far?
Yes, it depends which lot though. So like maybe if you want to exaggerate it a little bit, say 40 or 50% that they're gonna take,
Okay. All right.
and that gives you a bit more of a conservative estimate because it's harder to find a 30% or
Okay.
20% lot. Most of them will want 40 or 50.
Okay. So let's even go 50. So that gives you 5K in income. You
Yep.
have a $3,500 payment, which included your insurance, I think you said. So that gives you $1,500 a month in cash flow, or $18,000 a year in cash flow. And you said, I think, a $280,000 car, you put down 20 grand. That's a freaking 90% ROI on your $20,000 down payment. Am I far off?
No, I mean, cash on cash return. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. But also, don't forget, your car is only being used 10 days a month in this case. So what are you doing the other 20 days? You can drive it if you want. So you have a Lambo for 20 days a month. You're making a 90% return on your money. Or I need to run those numbers again. I kind of lost you there, but it sounds approximately right. And also at the same time, you're still making the $3,000, $3,500 because you're
Payment, which is paying down
yeah.
your payment,
Yeah, you're
your
building equity
principal.
in the car. And because it's not depreciating, because we bought it at the bottom of its depreciation, we're still going to get that at the end.
Well, if I lost you, then my math makes no sense. So let me start over. I want to make sure everybody thinks through this because I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
very
So you're
interested. So
saying 20K down and your
20,
net is 1,500 bucks a month, yeah?
which is 18,000 a year in net
Yeah,
revenue. You have
correct.
20,000 as your down payment. That's a 90% ROI. Plus, as you pointed out, that doesn't include the percentage of the payment that's going towards principal reduction. That's just cash on cash ROI.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. So if you bought the car with 20K down and you
Yep.
were netting 18,000 a year, yes, that's a 90% return. Yeah.
I have not bought a real estate property with a 90% return per year yet. So that sounds pretty good. All right.
Yeah.
Just to fascinate my intrigue on a jet, give me like just run me through like a ballpark formula if you're cost, down payment, and then you mentioned something between 20 and 40%. But let me kind of understand those down payment parameters and your price of acquisition. Just ballpark.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for as like an entry level jet, or you don't even have to buy a jet technically. You could buy a turboprop. So we have one that's been very, very profitable for us. It's called a Pilatus. It's a turboprop plane. You can buy one for about $4 million.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so you could put down 20% on that, which is what, like yeah. No,
800K.
800,000, yeah.
Yep.
800,000. So you put 800K down on this plane, and you finance the rest. And
Mm-hmm.
so essentially you're doing the same thing. You're probably going to be paying down about 30K a month of the loan.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously is building equity for you. So $360,000 a year, that's almost 50% that you're making
Mm-hmm.
right there. Then on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, your expenses are probably going to be about $1 million a year, all in, including loan servicing and everything, everything, everything. And like we shoot to make about 1.5 to $2 million in gross per year on this asset. Off of that, the charter company is going to take a management fee.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll take 300 or 400,000, and you should be left with about 300,000 as well, net.
I mean, for not having to manage the asset, I mean, that's the other thing here is what you're describing is it's kind of a hands-off management. You procure the asset, you turn it over to somebody who does all of the booking and all of the upkeep and everything. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a pretty high risk reward payoff.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, like one thing I like about assets like this is we're not buying something that we don't understand. We're not buying something that is like digital or like Bitcoin or something like that. Those are great. But at the end of the day, I know that if I buy a jet and I charter it, let's say for 6 months or a year, and I'm like, you know what? This is not making me enough money. Let me just sell it. So, worst case scenario, I've paid off part of this jet, hopefully built up some equity in it. But then at the end of the day, I could just sell it and get at least most of my money back. So it's not like a total loss. Like there's not really a scenario where you have a total loss because you have insurance coverage if anything bad happens, you have the asset to sell if anything doesn't work out quite like you expected, and best case scenario, you make a bunch of money.
Right on. Very interesting. So let me ask you a question. How do you think about debt as it relates to your investments? I'm guessing that you don't subscribe to the Dave Ramsey school of no debt ever philosophy.
He's my nemesis. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, kind of. So I don't subscribe to that because I mean, he has a point when the market is very tough. If you overextend yourself and you over leverage, you're going to get burned. And I've been burned many times in my life, but I'm okay with that because I figured I'm going to go all in and something is going to work out instead of me trying to be like careful and conservative and not ever lose because that's a losing game in and of itself. I would rather make so much money that my losses don't count. And
Hmm.
so, how can I make that money? If I'm leveraging correctly and smartly and I'm doing my due diligence, I can do that. Debt, I think, is a huge, huge aspect of wealth. And I think the wealthiest people in the world, it's not because they're smarter, it's not because they have, whatever connections. It's true, it's part of it. But what they really learned is how to use debt correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I personally like part of the things that I teach in my program is how to get access to 0% interest debt, which is like business credit. And so actually I'll show you. I have like literally probably 30 or 40 credit cards. I counted these one day, but got a whole stack of them. And they're all full. Why? Because I can use this money to make more money. And as long as, and like worst case scenario, like I've run you through some of these numbers. Like let's say one of my credit cards ran out of 0% interest. And so now I'm paying 25%. No problem. That's fine. Because I'm going to take the $20,000 that was on that credit card, put it as a down payment on a Lambo, and then rent out that car and make more than my 25% that I'm paying on the credit card. Like you just have to make sure that you're outperforming whatever you're getting charged in interest. But as long as you're, using it wisely and you're not overextending yourself, I think it's a viable strategy, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's arbitrage, right? If I can borrow at 10 and I can earn 20, then why wouldn't I do that? Unless the underlying investment is a faulty thesis and that underlying investment value is going to go down precipitously. We
Exactly.
do a lot. Obviously, I'm in the real estate space. That's my background. But a great game out there right now in terms of investments is on the debt side of things because banks are starting to not be as liberal with some of their lending, especially around real estate. And, if you're able to leverage the real estate assets that you have, pull equity lines out on that at say 8.5 or 9.5%, and you can turn around and do a private money loan to an investor that you would buy that property for the amount that you're lending them anyways, and you can make 16, 18, 20%. Why wouldn't you do that and make that arbitrage? It's just the difference between looking at debt as your nemesis, as you said, or looking at debt as a tool to lever up your wealth and your assets under management.
Exactly. Yeah, and what you explained is a really, really smart model. If you can get access to something that's security backed, I mean, that's totally a good strategy. And like as long as you're not investing into something crazy, like you're not taking out loans to invest into some meme coin or something, like you should be fine.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Okay, so tell me a little bit about, I'm just curious about this question because I think that inflation has hit a secular low, right? Let's call that from the 80s through 2020. We've seen inflation increase, and now it's starting to go down a little bit. We might see a recession on the horizon. I still am in that camp. But my question to you is this. How do you think about inflation, whether you agree with me that it's on a secular rise or not? And how does it impact either your investments or borrowing? And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts around inflation in general.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I actually had a very interesting teaching that I did in my program that inflation is actually necessary. We need inflation. It exists for a reason. It stimulates the economy. It causes money to be injected into businesses and overall economy. So it causes things to grow and, expand. We need that.
So you
But
don't
at
have
the
asset
same time,
deflation.
yeah, but at the
Yeah.
same time, we need to own physical assets that are going to appreciate when inflation happens. So I am a huge supporter of that and investing into things that are anti-inflation. So like, for example, real estate, I think you should own real estate because as inflation goes up, so does the value of your assets. So even though we might have, let's say, $100,000 in our bank account this year, and then in a year we still have $100,000, our buying power has decreased. So it might look the same, but we can't buy as many things with it because inflation has caused the prices of things to go up. So I think it's very smart to invest into things I call trophy assets.
Mhm.
So these are things that are not easily replaceable. Like let's say there's a beach that has a very exclusive beach that has 10 houses on it. There's only 10 houses and they're only going to continue going up in value. And if you're investing into like a non-geographically gated area, like for example, like Dallas or Houston, like it's just huge. There's no like water or mountains or anything that's like constricting it. So you could just keep building as far as you want. And so that's why prices are not so high. Whereas if you go somewhere like Monaco, for example, it's very tight geographically. There's only so much space. In a market like that, I think is never going to go down in value. Even if you look at it historically for the last like 90 years or so, it's never gone down. Even in global recessions, it's only plateaued a couple times, but it's never gone down. It's always grown in value. Why? Because it's a very limited amount of space and the buildings there are valuable, and people have a desire to live there for tax benefits or lifestyle or safety, whatever it is. So areas like that, those are true trophy assets. You might not get a ton of cash flow from them, but when inflation hits, you're in a very good spot.
Love that. Great explanation. Um, I live in Park City, Utah.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, where I grew up was after born in Los Angeles, but grew up in Salt Lake City. And interestingly, as you described that, Salt Lake is surrounded geographically, essentially on three sides. You've got the Great Salt Lake to the north. You've got the Ochre Mountains to the west, and then you've got the Rocky Mountains, the Wasatch Mountains, I should say, to the east. And so you can only go. And then at the end of the South Valley, there's kind of like a corridor that kind of shuts off that edge of the valley. So we've seen Utah, believe it or not, has been the number one fastest appreciating real estate market going back to 1990, up something like
Oh,
600% over that period of time. And people are always like, why Utah? And I'm like, well, we're geographically bound. You can only go to the edge of both those mountains and to the Great Salt Lake and to the South
mhm.
Valley, and then you're out of space. So I think that's a great point. You want to hold trophy assets or things that are hard to replicate during times of inflation. That's a great lesson. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about, I know you're into blockchain. You mentioned cryptocurrency coins earlier. So as it relates to scarcity and limited supply, I'd love to know anything you want to comment on as it relates to blockchain, and then bring that home maybe around Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're headed right now, blockchain technology isn't going anywhere. I think it's definitely going to be the future of a lot of things that we're doing, and it might have fizzled down a little bit, the excitement about it, as the crypto market went on a bad run here, but we're back up to some highs, and I think that it's here to stay for sure. I think it's been so ingrained in a lot of things that we're doing that people are I think a lot of people are silently working on solutions we've never even thought of in the background using blockchain technology. And so I've been involved in a couple projects there, and it's been very interesting to see the applications that they're finding. And at the end of the day, like, people value things that increase speed or
Mm-hmm.
efficiency. And so if it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to do or it's faster, like, people will always buy into that. There's no scenario like, sure, they might resist the change, they might not be excited about it, but over time, somebody somewhere is going to be like, hey, let me give it a try. Oh, wow, that was easy. This is now the new way I do it. And then somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And that's how these things spread. So there might be a lot of resistance right now, but as soon as people realize how much easier it is to use blockchain technology for a lot of the things that they're already doing, I guarantee they're just going to switch right over. And the same thing I think happened with like phones and the internet and email and stuff like that. Nobody sends letters anymore, you know.
Right.
But like, people resisted it at the beginning. They didn't want to email, but now it's like, wow, why wouldn't I email somebody? It's just so much faster and easier. So I think it's the same thing happening there. And then when it comes to like scarcity of supply, a lot of people are huge Bitcoin maximalists where they will want to hold a lot of Bitcoin as we go into this time where we're not really sure what kind of currencies we're going to have. We have CBDC and all these things coming out, and it's cool, it's interesting. I don't think we're going to transact in Bitcoin. I think it's going to be kind of like the gold of the future, where it's this asset. Like, yeah, technically I can buy something with a piece of gold, but not everybody's going to want to accept it. I think the same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin because the network is just not fast enough to process that many transactions. And so I think it opened people up to the idea that it's possible, but I think they're going to find the actual viability in another cryptocurrency. And a lot of people believe that's going to be XRP. I don't think it's going to be XRP. I think it might be a couple of the other ones, but there's some very interesting projects, that's for sure. One of my friends actually is doing a project right now. I'm not allowed to say where or how, but he's gotten the government of a country to accept his cryptocurrency, which is backed by the US dollar,
Hmm.
um, to it be like like not a global, but a national currency. So
Hmm.
they accept it everywhere now. And so he's installing all the terminals, he's working with a bank and all that stuff. And so it's very interesting because they basically took US dollars, they put it into the bank as like kind of like gold-backed dollars, but these are dollar-backed crypto
Hmm?
tokens. And so
Tokens.
they have all these tokens circulating throughout the country.
Have you ever heard Alex Hermosi's value equation? Are you familiar with that at all?
No.
It's really interesting. I'm going to show you. We made a graphic of it because I wanted to, kind of have something to reflect back on when we're doing our marketing campaigns. I'll share it with you really quickly. But what you just described is the denominator of Alex Hermosi's value equation, which I thought was really interesting. So, just at a very high level, those of you that are on YouTube can watch this, but he talks about most companies and products focus on the top end of this equation, telling a customer or a person how they're going to accomplish their dream outcome with
Hmm.
their service or product. And then he says you times the dream outcome by the perceived likelihood of achievement. So you want this to be as high as humanly possible in the numerator, and then in the denominator, you divide that by the time delay it takes you to achieve that dream outcome and the amount of effort and sacrifice it takes to achieve that dream outcome. And he says most companies and products focus on the top end of this equation, but the products that really crush and the companies that he's gone in and turned a $1 million a year revenue company into $100 million
Hmm.
revenue company, he's like, I just focus down here. I just get them to tell people how their product is going to help them reach their goals faster and with a lot less effort and sacrifice. And that was just
Yeah.
kind of interesting as you were describing cryptocurrencies and blockchain. You talked about, hey, we want to do whatever product or service we're doing or what other problem we're solving in a lot less time with a lot less friction. So that's really interesting. It tells me that blockchain has a long ways to go. There's a lot of
Yeah.
value there.
Oh no, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've gone so far into implementing blockchain. It's not like somebody's going to change their mind one day and be like, "Oh, never mind. Actually, you know what? We were wrong." Like it's not going away.
Love it. So, Austin, let's end with the last question that I have for you, and then I would love you to share where can people find you? Do you I know you have I believe you have a podcast or you have something that people can follow you regularly, and how can people connect with you if they're interested in your coaching company? But before you go to that, I would love to just ask you, like, what myth about finances, wealth, do you wish that most people knew the truth about?
Well, there's this myth rolling around about passive income, and there's actually I'd say two, and they're totally contradictory because one of them says that there is no such a thing as passive income because you always have to do at least something. Like
Hmm.
even if you're working one day a year, then that's doing something. And so they're like, yeah, passive income doesn't exist. And then there's this other crowd that says, there is such a thing as passive income, but you have to be able to like invest into the stock market and just let it run and you don't do anything. I think there's a hybrid between those two. And I've really implemented this not just in my investments, but also in my portfolio of businesses, where if you can find solid operators or managers to operate these things for you, even if I had, let's say, 100 rental properties, I wouldn't have to go, change the sink or fix the sink or the refrigerator or whatever it is. I have a team of management that does that for me. And I think if you hire the right people, you can truly make anything passive. Or, of course, you have somebody manage it for you, like we do with the private jets and we do with the exotic cars and stuff like that. There are passive income investments. They do truly work. But you have to remember that that person is going to get a piece of the pie. You just have to remember that, hey, I'm not going to get 100% of this because the person managing it for me is going to get 20%. And I'm okay with that. I would rather have 100 investments that I get 80% of than me trying to manage one and get 100%.
I love that. Yeah, that makes me think of Warren Buffett, right? I don't think Warren Buffett is doing anything more in those companies than managing those P&Ls and noticing if there's a problem and then replacing the person at the top that that is running that company. Uh,
Exactly.
but the scale that that man has created based on the formula you just mentioned is absolutely astronomical. So thank you for that. Where can
Yeah.
people find you? How can they follow you, brother?
Yeah. So the best way is on Instagram. My handle is at Austin Zelan. So AUSTIN ZELAN. And I do have a podcast. It's Better Business with Austin Zelan. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcast, everywhere.
And if you want wardrobe tips, or you just like to look at bitchin' cars, I definitely suggest you follow Austin on Instagram. You will see both of those things. Definitely a fun lifestyle that you live, brother. Thank you for sharing so generously with us. It was a blast having you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.